Greetings viewers, Eric the Car Guy here, back again with another repair video for you. And behind me I have tonight we're going to party like it's 1999 Acura 2.3 CL. In essence it's a Honda Accord. At this point you may have seen it in more than one video. But one of the issues that it has is a leaking radiator. This is an ultra common problem on this type of radiator, not just on Hondas, but I've seen other makes that use this style of radiator where you've got plastic tanks crimped on top of an aluminum core, and the gasket or seal in between the plastic and the metal tends to leak over time. It's almost a maintenance item with these type of radiators. I'm sure at one point in time that if you have an Accord or a CL similar to this, that you're going to have to deal with this issue. So today we're going to go through the step-by-step of swapping out the radiator in this CL. One of the things we're going to have to do here is we're going to have to lift this up to get up underneath it to get to some of the stuff on the radiator, mainly to drain it. So I'm going to lift it up now, support it with jack stands. Okay, now that we have the vehicle lifted up, I know some of you are going to be curious of what I was using to lift, and that would be these areas here. They're on both sides. They're kind of areas to where if this vehicle were in a ditch or needed to be tied down into a car carrier, they use these points on either side. There's one over there also. And as far as placement of the jack stands, they just go on the pinch welds on both sides, you can see. So not a big deal there. But right in this area, that's where our radiator drain is. So I am going to place a drain pan and start draining the radiator. All right, for me, anytime I get up under something, I always put on my safety glasses. I don't like junk falling in my eyes. As I said, here's our radiator drain. Just turn it counterclockwise, and I will get this thing a-draining while we're doing our other work. Something that's going to aid in the draining process is to remove the radiator cap. This will allow air to get into the top and it will drain a lot more rapidly. I'm going to be removing, these are the brackets. There's one on each side here that hold the actual radiator in. I'm not going to remove the radiator fans now. It honestly does make it so much easier. But that leaves us with a couple of electrical connections for the cooling fans. We've got this one here for the condenser fan, and then I believe, yeah, we may have to go down underneath a little bit to get the one for the actual cooling fan. But I don't believe we need to remove the lower splash shield or any of that stuff while we're here. I will have to remove the upper radiator hose, which is not that big a deal. Before we do that, I'm going to remove this bracket. There's just about everything in this job is going to be 10 millimeter. This is no exception. I can just take this bracket, flip it back up like this, and I can very easily take my overflow out now. Just going to take a pair of these pliers and just use it to push the hose off the top of the radiator. And then the overflow is just held in by this bracket, so you can just pull up on it and it's out. You put that on the bench. All right, now that we've done that, it is much easier to see the electrical connection that we need to disconnect for the cooling fan. There's just a tab that you push on. And then you pull back on it. So there's a little tab, get the connector up here, a little tab right here that you push down and then pull back. Okay, right here at the top of the radiator there's a bracket with a couple of relays. I'm just going to remove the fastener for that right now. This will make it so that that relay assembly falls out of the way, and it'll be a bit easier to get to our condenser fan connector. I've actually got now that that relay assembly is out of the way, we got a couple of connectors that we can deal with now. One of them is for the condenser fan, and just like on the other side, there's a tab that you push down and then you can pull it out. So there's that. Push down on this tab and you can pull it out of there. But next we have the connector for the AC compressor. And for this one, we got to do two things. We got to dismount the connector from the condenser fan assembly, and we do that by pushing up on this tab. It's difficult to see, and then pulling back. You see this tab right here? And we're pushing back on that. And then we'll push it back this way. And really, that's all I need to do. I don't need to disconnect it or anything. I can just move this stuff out of the way, and all my electrical connections are disconnected. So really, this just leaves me with my upper and lower radiator hoses to deal with. I'm going to take the upper radiator hose off while it's up here, but I'm going to take the lower radiator hose off after I lift the assembly up. I can very easily get to the connection at that point. So upper radiator hose next. Okay, and for this we just have a couple of spring clips. We're going to use those same pliers that I used earlier. You can also use a pair of channel locks for these if you want, because I know that not everybody's going to have a set of these angle pliers like this, but a pair of channel locks, a lot of people have, can also be used to undo these clips. Now, you may find that they get into a position like this where they're locked loose. If that happens, leave it, because that's actually going to be to your benefit. Now I'm going to open those channel locks up all the way. I'm going to put them on the outside of the radiator hose, and I'm just going to lightly squeeze as I rock back and forth. Same in the back. I meant to do that. I'm going to unhook this from my AC hose. And I have my hose removed as a complete assembly. Now, if you're going to replace a hose, the upper radiator hose is the one to replace. In fact, I rarely replace a lower radiator hose. I get this a lot. A lot of people think like that both hoses should be hot to the touch if your cooling system is working properly, and that's just not true. The upper radiator hose carries all the hot water from the engine to the radiator. The lower radiator hose carries all the cooler water that's already been cooled by the radiator back to the engine. So the upper radiator hose is always going to be the hottest one, and the lower one's always going to be cool. So as a result of that, this upper one goes through a lot more heat cycles and suffers a lot more heat than the lower hose does. So if you're tight on cash and you only want to replace one hose, replace the upper hose. And sometimes what you'll find is these get, for lack of a better word, they start to look pregnant. And that means that pretty much the internals of the hose has failed. So if that's the case, no better time to replace it than now. All right, now let's remove the brackets that hold the radiator in place. There's two, and 10 millimeter fasteners on either side. There, and there, and there. All right, now the only thing that's actually still attached here is going to be the lower radiator hose, and I'm going to pick the assembly on up out of here and then disconnect the lower radiator hose while it's up out. You have to massage things a little bit. I'm going to close off my drain. Okay, to disconnect the lower radiator hose, I'm going to do the same as I did for the upper. Let's move the clamp back. I'm there with my pliers and sort of work it back and forth a little. I should be able to just slide it off there. go. Those of you that know me know that this is not my first rodeo when it comes to working on Acuras. But one of the things that I have learned about these radiator replacement jobs, particularly with aftermarket radiators that I'm putting in now, is that if you reuse this lower clamp, there's a high probability that it's going to leak. So I recommend replacing it, like just taking it off and instead replacing it with this type of clamp. I think you're going to be much better off if you do this. You're much better off replacing it with one of these type of clamps than reusing this one, because I often find that if I reuse this clamp down here that it will leak. All right, here's our old radiator assembly. Now on it, very likely you will find these two little rubber insulators, or whatever you want to call them. But remove those now. They're both the same, so you can't really get them mixed up. But install those back on the vehicle now. If you're curious where they go right in here. One there, one here. And while we're at it, we'll just remove these leaves from the condenser. This right here is the AC condenser that's in front of the radiator. And if there's any debris, we're going to take care of it now while we have access to it. All right, it's going to be easier to work on this thing up here on the bench. If you're going to have trouble with any of the fasteners on this, it will be these bottom ones. I'll give you a close-up here in a second, but they're really crusty. So I'm going to hit them with some penetrating oil and let it soak for a little bit before I try to break these loose, because like I said, if you're going to have trouble, it's going to be here. These fasteners have been soaking for a little while. They're all 10mm fasteners, by the way. One other thing that's going to give you an advantage, if you have it, is an impact tool. It doesn't have to necessarily be a pneumatic tool. It can also be an electric tool, but the impacting motion is much better at loosening up rusty fasteners than a twisting motion. With a twisting motion, you're liable to break something, but impacting it seems to knock things loose. So I'm just going to zap these out, hope for the best. Well, that one broke anyway. Let's spin this around. These fasteners up at the top don't suffer nearly the corrosion that the lower ones do, so I should be able to get these right out. Also 10mm. Remember, this slightly different fastener went with a condenser fan, and this one over here did not have a fastener because that's where our relay assembly was. All right, now that we've removed all the fasteners, we should be able to just lift these cooling fans right on up off of here. And that's pretty much all we need from this old one. Gonna scrap it. And here's our bright, shiny new radiator. It is aftermarket. All right, well, some of these should come with a some assembly required sticker on the outside, which is absolutely true. Now, one thing I've noticed with some radiators is sometimes these aren't necessarily tight, so just make sure that the petcock's tight. Now, these things here are for the automatic transmission cooler lines. The vehicle that we're working on today is a manual transmission, so if you had an automatic transmission, when I lifted the radiator up out of the vehicle, I would have at the same time undone these automatic transmission lines, except for, instead of, here I'll show you. All right, so if this vehicle were an automatic transmission vehicle, there would be two transmission cooler lines right about in this area. So instead of trying to disconnect them from underneath, what I often do is I just disconnect those cooler lines here, because there's usually hard lines that go to this point and then rubber lines that go from the engine to the transmission, or the transmission to the radiator. So there's usually rubber lines there, but you can disconnect those rubber lines up here where they're easy to get to and pull the whole assembly out in the same way that I just did. Okay, so back to our new radiator. If this were an automatic transmission, we'd be attaching these little ends onto these areas here in order to run the automatic transmission cooler lines, but since it's a manual transmission, we don't have to do that. I'm just going to leave these caps on. You just leave this whole thing alone. You don't have anything with a manual transmission to mess with here, so don't mess with it. I just have this little cap to remove, the lower radiator hose, and you'll notice on this model there are no nuts inside of these clips here, and they're inside this bag. So we're going to transfer those and install those here so they have some place for our fasteners to go into. These are those nuts that I'm speaking about here. Focus. Now, there you can see that there's a little tab on the end here, and the other side sort of has a tapered end, and you always want the tapered side facing where the fastener goes. This little tab is to help lock that nut into place. But when you insert these, you want to have the tapered side facing outwards towards the side where the fastener is going to go in. Okay, and to put those in, remember we want our tapered side to face out towards the outside. And I'll get them started by hand, and then I'll push them the rest of the way with, like, say, a pocket screwdriver or equivalent. And once it's in there, make sure that it lines up. It's not quite lined up there. There we go. We have to do that 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more times, it looks like. And if you're confused on where they go, that's my condenser fan. I'm all backwards here. So the cooling fan goes here. So we only need one here, one here, and one here. Some will go in easier than others. Make sure it's lined up. Yeah, close enough. Get the other ones at the top. If this were an OE radiator, I would not be doing this, by the way. But I would have spent more money. Sometimes you spend money to buy time. And sometimes things don't work out like you planned. I'm gonna have to hold that one in place because the little plastic thing that held it into place broke off. It happens. We'll still be able to fasten it down. It'll just be a little more work for us. Alright, let's position our fans. Okay, I had this fan here flipped around, unfortunately. The longer bolts go in the cooling fan. One that's going to go here, or I should say the bolts washers. So you have two types here. The ones with the bigger washers with the Phillips head screws go in the cooling fan. The other one that doesn't have that goes in the condenser. Sometimes you might have to massage them a little bit to get them to fit. Now, I'm going to use my magnet on my pocket screwdriver to hold this up in here. You can employ any method you choose. Not going to tighten them all the way down. Just going to get them started. This way, we've got some wiggle room. All right, now I'm going to tighten them down. Now that they're all started. If this were an automatic, one thing I really should mention is these have a certain orientation. And there's usually an assembly that's bolted on here. That's kind of why this is here. And it has the rubber hoses that go to it. So if you have that, make sure when you put these on that your orientation's correct when you put your hoses on. So the next thing I'd do, now that I have these cooling fans on, if this were an automatic, is I'd be laying those hoses in here, putting these on, and then tightening them into place. But that's that's what you do if you have an automatic version of this. Let's get this thing on the car. It's pretty much reverse of removal here. I'm going to install my lower radiator hose. Using my new clamp. Like I said, you're much better off replacing this clamp now. You can tighten it too much and actually break that neck. Now remember those little rubber grommets that we replaced? We're going to try to get these little ends that are on the bottom of the radiator right into that. You have to reach down and feel for them. Find out where they're supposed to be. Once you get one, the other usually falls into place. There we go. We're in. Okay, let's reinstall our brackets. These, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter which side they go on. They aren't set up to be biased to one side or the other. However, just for the sake of harmony, I believe this one was on this side. It had a little less rust. Same as always, get all your fasteners started before you run them down. Alright, why don't we start by restoring our electrical connection, or in this case, just put this AC compressor clutch connector back on. It just slides on until you hear it click home. So that one's back where it should be. Then we're going to plug the condenser fan back in. Clips back into place. Get our relays back up into position, and I'm going to put that fastener in right now. Reconnect the cooling fan. Upper radiator hose. Now this one you might be asking, Eric, why did you replace the clamps on that? Well, two reasons. One, I don't often see problems with these clamps. Two, if there's a problem with these clamps, they're easy to fix. Drain a little coolant out, pop the hose off, or even better, just slide this back and put the clamp around the outside without even removing the hose. But I will say that I always try to get the clamp back in the same position that it was when I took it off. This helps seat the hose onto the new radiator. Now with this one that's just sort of flopping around, let's see, where's the, yeah. With this one with it flopping around like that, I'll just sort of hold it in position, and then you just hit the one side, and then it'll spring into place. You see these little hooks? This tab was over the top of those hooks. So if you knock down this side that has the hooks there, it will spring back into place, which is exactly what it did. And as you can see, I've got it in the same orientation, or darn close to it, than what it was when I took it off. All right, we've got one last bracket to hook up, and we're about done. Before I put this bracket down, probably a good idea to put my overflow back in, and this little piece here needs to slide into that metal bracket by the battery, like right here that I was showing you. Just slide that into place. Put the hose on. I know you know how I feel about these battery cables. Some of these radiators my funnel does not fit on. This may be one of them. Before we go there, I'm going to remove my drip pan. And I have a drum in the back here that I store my coolant in, and that way they can come and take it away when it gets filled up. Now this is the part where I fill it up and bleed the system. And luckily, yeah, my funnel will attach. This spill-free funnel thing is been really handy for stuff like this for several years for me. It's a good tool. I'll post the link in the description to where to find yourself one. Now comes the part that a lot of people have misconceptions about, and that is bleeder valves. They think that bleeder valves are where you bleed the air out. Not necessarily true. Right here is the bleeder valve for this vehicle. It's located back up by the intake manifold, just off the thermostat housing. And before I fill the system up, I will loosen it. So I'm just loosening it up. Just takes a couple of turns. And the real way to use bleeder valves is like I'm about to show you, and that you use them to fill the system. If you filled a system and you didn't have a bleeder valve or something like that, it would be a little more difficult because the air would have to bubble up out of the same opening that you're pouring the coolant into. So you'll notice as you're filling it up, it'll be like bloop, bloop, bloop. But if you have a bleeder valve like this, it'll allow the air to escape that's being displaced by the coolant that's going into the system. If you don't have a bleeder valve, what you can do is, very conveniently here, we have a coolant line going to, I believe, the idle air control valve, that you could just remove this coolant line and do the exact same thing. But I can't stress enough how these bleeder valves and using bleeder valves is only there to make filling the system easier. It's not how you necessarily bleed the air out of the system. That's going to be part 2 of this procedure. In fact, I have an entire video that I've dedicated to bleeding a cooling system that I will also post a link to in the description. Okay, so from here, I'm just going to dump the coolant into here. I have pre-mixed 50-50 coolant here. It's green coolant. Back in '99, Honda was still using just regular green coolant, so you're just fine. The newer updated blue silicate stuff, you could use that. In fact, I'm not exactly sure when that came in, but it was shortly after this time period. This is like one of the last ones to get green coolant. So if you change the coolant out every 30,000 miles, you should be good. You'll see it's bubbling a little bit, but it's going in a lot faster because it's coming, air is rushing out that bleeder valve. Okay, it's now gotten to a point where as I dump it in, I see coolant spraying out, no longer air. So I'm going to close off the bleeder valve and top the system off, and then we'll complete our procedure. Grab the wrong one. See, now that we have the bleeder valve closed, how you hear it bubbling a little bit more? All right, the funnel's topped off about there, so I know that my system is quote-unquote filled up. Now we're going to go into the vehicle and complete our preparations. We're going to start our procedure by starting the vehicle. Turn the blower motor off. Actually, we can't in this case. So what I'll do is I'll turn the temp as high as it'll go, 90. I'll let it sit there for a second, and then I'll turn the system off. We don't want our blower fan operational while we're doing this. That will actually sort of negate what we're trying to do, which is purge the air from the system. But we want to put the heat all the way on hot, so the heater control valve opens up, and as we're purging the system, the air inside, perhaps that's trapped inside the heater core, will be purged out of the heater core, and we'll have basically a system that's free of air. For those of you that are curious, we have 151,000 miles on this car. Okay, our next step in this procedure is to run the engine at about 2,500 RPM until the cooling fans kick on. They should both kick on. This will tell us two things: that the thermostat has opened and there's coolant circulating through the system, and we should have all the air out. But it should also tell us that both cooling fans are operational or able to operate. If both cooling fans don't come on, then there may be a problem, an electrical problem or a sensor problem or something like that somewhere. So I have a little trick for this. I could sit here and just hold the throttle open, but my trick is to take a pair of needle nose vice grips, put it on this little peg here, adjust the idle where I want it, and this is where the air will come out. Now we know we purged the air. Now we know the cooling fans work. We're good to go. We can wrap this thing up. I'm gonna top off the overflow. There's basically a line on the side that says max. I'm gonna top it off to that with coolant, and we will call this one done. Radiators, not so bad. Most important part of this whole procedure, well, obviously get everything back together correctly and make sure you plug everything in, is to bleed that air out of the cooling system at the end. I can't stress enough how important that is. If you don't do that and you don't do it properly, you could experience like an intermittent overheat or a fluctuating idle, or intermittent heat, like you turn the heat on and it blows like hot for a while and then it blows cold, any number of things. And often people jump to the conclusion that they now have a bad head gasket. Honestly, this engine is not known for head gasket failures. However, it is known for just being so-and-so when it comes to getting the air out of the system. So if that's the case, then just seriously, just make sure that you've purged the air out of the system, because if not, you're going to have problems. Some radiators are harder to purge than others. So if you go through everything in the procedure that I showed you and you're having a lot of trouble and you bought like a really cheap radiator, it's probably what it is. I've found just some brands of radiator just are really difficult to do. So what you would do in that case is, if it starts like boiling over really bad, turn the car off, let it sit for like 5 minutes. What'll happen is the thermostat will eventually open, and that's what's happening. Air is trapped in that system and it's not circulating through it, and the thermostat is staying closed. So you're getting like superheated coolant on one side and no flow through to, for anything to happen. So if you just let it sit, the thermostat will pop open and coolant will begin to circulate, and then you'll be able to purge the air out at that point. So if you're having trouble bleeding it out and the cooling fans aren't coming on, it's like bubbling all over the place, you don't know what you did wrong, just shut it off, let it sit for like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, start over. I bet you it'll work then. Another thing is, if you may notice, I left the front end off the ground. That will help give the air a place to go. Air wants to find the highest point in the system, and any advantage that you can get. But the bleeder valve is not there to bleed the system. So you don't run the car, open the bleeder valve and let the air come out. That's not how it works. Do it like this and you'll have much better results. I think that about covers everything. I'm hoping on the radiator replacement on this 99CL/Accord. You could just take this exact same procedure and apply it to an Accord very easily. In fact, you could apply this type of procedure to a lot of different vehicles. I think I did one on a Mitsubishi where I did the same thing. Remove the cooling fans and everything as an assembly. It's just easier. Why work hard if you don't have to? Anyway, I am Eric the Car Guy. You can always find me at EricTheCarGuy.com, where if you have automotive questions, I would ask that you submit them to my search function at the top of the homepage. Just type in a couple of keywords about your problem, brake noise, overheat, something like that, and there'll be a list of possible answers to come up to your query. If you do not get an answer there, feel free to sign up for our forum. It's absolutely free. All you have to do is submit your email address and make sure you respond to the confirmation email. If not, check your spam folder. And you will be a member of EricTheCarGuy.com, where you can submit your questions to the service and repair section of our forum, where me and a bunch of other people who are really knowledgeable and helpful will be more than happy to try to help you with that automotive issue. If you want to connect with me via social networks, you can find me at Google+, Facebook, and Twitter. And I close my videos with, be safe, have fun, stay dirty.